This morning, a breakthrough in Austin. Some Republicans finally on board with expanding Medicaid. It now has the votes to pass the House, so why isn't it moving? One of our questions for the author of the bill, State Rep. Julie Johnson. Justice handed down in Minnesota for the murder of George Floyd. State Senator Royce West says that verdict, though, is not a victory, but recognition of work that remains. We'll discuss that with him this morning. In the Texas House, a group of bipartisan bills to reform criminal justice, enhanced training for law enforcement, ending arrests for nonviolent offenses, and narrowing the use of the death penalty. Chairwoman of the House's Criminal Jurisprudence Committee, Nicole Collier, is with us. And as we enter the final 5 weeks of the legislative session, what big issues are left for Texas lawmakers? And what will not get passed?
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to our viewers across the state. I'm Jason Whiteley. Let's begin this week with the top political headlines right here in Texas. Texas lawmakers want to make it harder for you to find out how they are spending your money. The state Senate is considering a bill that would no longer let you see how much a government employee makes in salary unless that government employee says it is okay. Public information like that, the Texas Tribune points out, helps all of us understand exactly how our tax dollars are being spent. This bill has bipartisan support in the Senate. You've seen the surge at the Texas-Mexico border, but have you seen what Texas Monthly reported the other day? Customs and Border Patrol are finding wooden ladders like this all along the border wall. It seems migrants have been using these cheap, makeshift devices to scale over the U.S. fence. That fence, a reminder, cost us $27 million a mile to put up. And Texas Senator Ted Cruz is paying a lot more for his personal security than any other Texan in Congress. The Dallas Morning News reported this one. Since the election, Cruz has spent $126,000 from his campaign account to pay for bodyguards and security systems. Senator Cruz gets a lot of threats, his spokeswoman told the paper, but she did not explain what led to the sudden increase in security spending after Election Day. Let's start this morning in Austin and a significant development in the state house. Almost 1 million Texans could get health insurance if Texas would ever expand Medicaid, something leaders have ignored for a decade, but a few days ago, something changed. Some Republicans joined Democrats in support of it, enough Republicans to give it the votes to pass. The lawmaker behind the bill is Julie Johnson, a state rep from Carrollton who represents northwestern Dallas County. Representative, good morning to you. Let's start with the big news out of this. How in the world did you get 9 Republicans to sign on board with this when this is something that Texas GOP has been against for a decade?
Well, you know, it's amazing what happens when you're actually able to sit down and talk with people. And when people will sit down and actually have an intelligent conversation. And what I have found is that when you have an opportunity to lay out the facts, show the bill, really talk about what it does, the overwhelming economic opportunity and benefit to each member's district, the case is irrefutable. And, you know, smart people have been signing on.
Well, let's talk about the bill. It's House Bill 3871. Give us the cliff notes, the brief version. What would this bill do if passed?
Well, this bill will fundamentally change healthcare in Texas. It will expand healthcare coverage for another 1.2 million people that don't have it. And it will provide pay parity with healthcare providers who accept Medicaid patients with Medicare rates. And that will transform access to care. And the other has a work incentive program that's really attractive and really interesting, that's unique from some of the other approaches. And it has some stopgap measures that have addressed some of the Republican concerns that the program ends if the federal program funding ends. So there's some triggers in there that have provided some security to some of the Republicans to support this project. But when you really lay it out, it takes advantage of a huge federal opportunity for Texas to gain billions of dollars in our healthcare system.
So you have the Republicans on board. You now have with all the Democrats as well, too. So that means you have enough votes in the House to get it passed. But the bill still hasn't come out of committee. And we're winding down the last 5 to 6 weeks of the session here. How likely is it to actually get to the floor, to actually get a vote?
Well, you know, it's amazing what can happen when leadership wants something to happen. So if the leadership, if Speaker Phelan wants to see this bill on the floor, it'll be on the floor. And that's really the sum total of it. Things can move really quickly around here when people want them to. And so it's amazing how that can happen. So I'm hopeful that we have demonstrated to the Speaker that this is the will of the House, that the majority of House members want to see this bill passed. And I'm really hopeful that he will expedite this process, and so we can provide relief to Texans and so many healthcare providers in our state.
Of course, if it is the will of the House and passes the House, it would still have to get beyond the Senate down the hall there. And the same story in the Senate. Nathan Johnson's bill, Democrat from Dallas, his bill is still sitting in committee. It's been there since March. Any luck over there for him to get any Republicans on board?
Well, I think at that point, if we can pass the House, then it's going to be up to the Senate to have some really hard reflection to see why are they not acting for the people of Texas, but the House is. So, they'll have to justify why they do or they don't do. But I am hopeful that Lieutenant Governor Patrick will see the wisdom of this. We'll see the overwhelming economic opportunities that this provides to our state. But most importantly, the good it'll do.
Representative, good luck to you. We appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me.
Let's stay with the legislature there for a moment. The one bill that the state constitution says lawmakers must pass is the state budget to keep the state running for 2 more years. The Texas Senate has passed its version of a budget. The House followed the past few days, and it gives a clear indication of what is still left for lawmakers to look at. Not just lawmakers, but Ross Ramsey to look at as well. He's the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune in Austin. Ross, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Doing well here. Does anything really stand out to you in these budgets, especially the one that the House passed on Thursday?
Yeah, the thing that really pokes out is that a lot of the money the state's going to end up spending over the next 2 years is not in either the House or the Senate budget. There's a big kerfluffle over Medicaid spending and Medicaid funding from the federal government. That's one thing. The bigger one is that there are about $38 billion in COVID aid coming from the federal government. Some of it's from the Trump administration, some from the Biden administration, that's not yet folded into the budget. And this is money that will go to the state, to cities and counties, to school districts, and to colleges. And until they settle that, they don't have a whole budget.
And doesn't sound like it at all. The legislature does have, about 5 weeks or so left in the regular legislative session here, too. What gets done and what does not get done in these remaining weeks?
The big things will get done. I'm confident the budget will get done. They always play brinksmanship with that. I think they'll do some things that come out of the outages that came with the polar vortex in February. They're going to do some, but not all of the police reform that they talked about doing. And they're going to, do some of the smaller stuff that they've been talking about doing. I don't know if they're going to get a voting bill out of here. That's another big fight that they've still got on the horizon.
Wow, that's certainly one to watch. Ross, thanks. Back to you in just a moment.
Thanks.
Coming up, the nation watched what happened in that Minnesota courtroom last week. The question now, what comes next? Will it move the Texas legislature to reforms? One of our questions for State Senator Royce West. And bipartisanship in the Texas House, Republicans and Democrats working together to reform criminal justice. We'll go through the potential changes with Chairwoman Nicole Collier when we come back. You're watching Inside Texas Politics.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Over the last 5 days, we have heard a lot of reaction to that guilty verdict of a former police officer in Minneapolis for the murder of George Floyd. But was that really a watershed moment? Will any substantial political change come of it, especially here in Texas? Our next guest is State Senator Royce West, a Dallas Democrat who has been behind most every police reform bill in the last decade here in Texas, perhaps even longer. Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning, Jason?
Doing well here. You were careful not to call this verdict a victory, saying there's still plenty to be done. Specifically, what work remains here in Texas?
Well, first of all, I want to make certain that we use Derek Chauvin as the poster child for police misconduct. And I think law enforcement and everyone else should agree with that. He is the poster child. And hopefully it sends a wake-up call to those few officers that would persist in that type of behavior. I'm glad to know a lot of individuals in law enforcement and know that that's not their type of conduct. It also has served as a blueprint, Jason, in terms of how you go about prosecuting officers that abuse the privilege that we give them as citizens to have the power over life and death.
A few days ago, the Senate there passed a couple of police reform bills that you alluded to in our last interview. One would require police officers to intervene if they see a coworker doing something wrong. Can anything else, though, realistically get accomplished this session as far as police reform goes?
Sure, I think you can. We've passed, in fact, we passed this week, last week, the duty to intervene and also the duty to make certain that you provide medical assistance if for some reason the officer doesn't put themselves in harm's way. There's a couple of other bills that we need to do. I want to make certain that we continue the debate as it relates to no-knock warrants, as an example, training, making certain that in the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement's sunset bill, that we put a provision in there requiring for a study and the development of a model policy concerning the use of deadly force here in the state of Texas. If we get those things done, I think that we have gone down the road and done some things that need to get done, as well as issues concerning training that need to take place.
Senator, you are always very careful with your words. You said continue the conversation. I'm curious, did the verdict change anything in Austin? I mean, last time we spoke, you said the George Floyd Act itself did not have enough votes to actually pass the legislature.
It didn't change that aspect of it for certain. It does not have enough votes to pass the legislature, the House or the Senate. But I do understand that and know that there are certain aspects that we have to do. I want to make sure, I would love to pass a bill named after George Floyd. We don't have the votes to do that. But the question is do you want substance over form or form over substance? And I think most people want substance. And so we've got to get as much police accountability or reform as possible this legislative session and continue to work on different issues and try to find consensus with the stakeholders.
Criminal justice reform obviously is just police reform and criminal justice reform, just two parts of all this. But economic reform, Senator, you know very well that is another massive piece of this puzzle in order to achieve equity. How in the world, in the final 60 seconds here, does the state try to bite into that big thing?
Thank you very much for asking that question. The 100 black men were statewide were in Texas at the Capitol yesterday. And I made certain to introduce them to the lieutenant governor and said, these are people that can get things done in the African-American community. You know, these issues we always talk about, economic development, poverty, and leaving poverty, school dropout, unemployment. These are people that they need to make certain, they being the lieutenant governor and leadership, need to put on these boards and commissions and hold them responsible for making certain that the issues that we always talk about, that we address, and we're responsible for addressing those issues in the manner in which they should be.
Senator West, we will wait and see how all that plays out. We appreciate your time as always.
My pleasure.
Let's move down the hall now through the Capitol Rotunda to the Texas House. There, Republicans and Democrats have put together a group of bills to reform, not police reform, but criminal justice here in this state. State Representative Nicole Collier is a Democrat from Fort Worth. She also chairs the House Criminal Jurisprudence Committee. Madam Chair, it's good to see you again. We appreciate the time this morning. I want to start with the Smarter Justice, Safer Texas group of bills. This is a package of bills. It's bipartisan, led by the Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan. And it really seems to me that the House is trying to make a statement when it comes to criminal justice reform.
Good morning, Jason. Yes, thank you so much. So what we're trying to do is push the needle forward to getting back to what the criminal justice system was really designed to do, is to punish those really harmful individuals who really do not contribute to society. And then it's also designed to get those back to work who may have made some missteps in their life and get them back into contributing to society.
Now, you have a bill that would expunge decriminalized offenses. That seems like common sense to me, but I presume you do have to codify it to actually make it happen. But there are other bills that would require electronic HR records for police officers, enhanced training for law enforcement, stopping hypnosis
during investigations and narrowing the use of the death penalty. How important are these today, and just why haven't these already happened?
When you talk about decriminalizing crimes that are no longer, offenses that are no longer crimes, that's so important, because even though it's no longer a crime, that arrest is on somebody's record. That's what we've got to get rid of, because when you have an arrest on your record, it shows up when somebody's doing a background check, whether you're applying for apartments, whether you're applying for housing, whether you're applying for credit, whether you're applying for a job. And so, these are marks on somebody's record. And if we're really talking about paying your debt to society, we don't need to keep that on their record their whole life, because that's not what rehabilitation is about.
Which of these bills do you think, Madam Chair, has the potential to get votes in the Senate and actually pass the Senate as well to end up on the governor's desk?
House Bill 1293, we're talking about allowing defendants the opportunity to have a motion for new trial. Right now, there's only very small circumstances when a judge can have a new trial when there's new evidence that is brought up. And with House Bill 1293, it's going to expand those opportunities when the district attorney agrees. And so this is a big step in the right direction. Limiting the law of parties is another step in the right direction. Senfronia Thompson out of Harris County has another bill dealing with motions for new trials. There's a bill about limiting arrest for fine-only offenses. I mean, and also you talked about the sharing of records. They talk about police records. So whenever an officer wants to transfer departments and file for a new job, oftentimes there's departments that don't have access to their employment records. And so what this will do is make those employment records available online. And so that way you could try to cut down on what they so-called pass the trash. They'll actually be able to see any type of violations in policy or protocol that are on that person's record. And so we can cut down on just keeping those individuals in the department.
All right, just a few weeks left of the legislature. We'll be watching how this unfolds, but we appreciate your time this morning, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Jason.
For the first time in years, the Republican-controlled House there passed a bill to let anyone carry a firearm without a permit. Problem is, it's not going anywhere in the Republican-controlled Senate. The politics of why not, that's coming up next on the Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ross Ramsey is back with us from the Texas Tribune. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram each week. And of course, Bernadine Steptoe, the political producer at WFAA in Dallas, joins us for the segment as well. We'll also start with you in this seemingly brand new political problem that just kind of emerged for state leaders. And it has to do with Medicaid and a waiver. What's going on with this for people who aren't really following that story?
There's a thing with the wonky name of the 1115 waiver, and it's part of the state's Medicaid program that is money used to compensate hospitals for uninsured patients that they have to treat in their emergency rooms and otherwise. It had a 10-year extension. The Biden administration said this wasn't filled out right during the end of the Trump administration. So this program is going to expire in September of 2022 unless the state reapplies. So the state's got to take care of that problem. And they think that it's the Biden administration trying to pressure Texas to join Medicaid Expansion, a separate program that's designed to insure up to 1 million Texans.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you, Bud. Is this political pressure here, or are hospitals really at stake of losing out a lot of federal money?
Well, all the conservative states around Texas have expanded Medicaid. Medicaid expansion is something that Texas has been stubborn about. There is support for it in the House, but the House made it clear last week that they want to study it and talk about it and not run into it with a 2-page amendment debated in 20 minutes. The House might want to expand Medicaid. Hospitals want to do it. Doctors want to do it. It's just not clear the Senate wants to do it. Until you have the Senate, Senator Nelson, Dan Patrick, it won't be expanded.
So, Bernadine, do you think that this will get done by the end of the regular legislative session? I can't imagine that hospitals aren't, down there beating the door down at the Capitol trying to make sure this passes.
I think that the state will have a lot of pressure on them. But what the imagination is, if our state leaders are willing to expand Medicaid, because keep in mind, most of them are against expanding the Medicaid provisions. So if it does happen, it is going to be because they've had a lot of pressure from hospitals and from residents. Because, you know, we have a number of residents who are uninsured.
No, indeed so, the most in the country. Ross, let's go back to you and something that, you know, Bud mentioned about the potential roadblocks in the Senate there. Last week we talked a lot on this program about constitutional carry, and it passed the House where anyone can carry a firearm without a permit, without any training. But that bill, for as much, you know, fanfare as there was in the House, it looks DOA in the Senate.
It doesn't have the votes yet. It's not completely dead. The lieutenant governor at the end of the week named a special committee that's going to hear this, a committee on constitutional matters. The chairman of it is the guy who's carrying this bill. They're going to try to get it out, but the House handed them a hot potato here.
Bud, answer this for me. The House is Republican controlled. The Senate's Republican controlled. Where's the disconnect? What's the politics behind it here?
Well, of course, first of all, the police organizations and people who do gun training, you know, don't want to do away with licensing and training in the state of Texas. The police have a great effect on the lieutenant governor and the governor, for that matter. The governor says he's trying to work out some form of permitless carry that will increase gun rights or broaden it a little bit. But the advocates for permitless carry aren't happy with anything. If you gave them permitless carry for everyone over 21, they'd say, wait a minute, everyone over 6 ought to be able to carry.
Yeah, it seemed, Bernadine, you're smiling at his comments here.
Well, I smiled when he said that those who want the open carrier, they're not going to be satisfied. But I think in the Senate, where you have a lot of the pushback, is Lieutenant Governor. The Lieutenant Governor, Patrick, has said that he does not support it. And anything that he doesn't support usually doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And when you organize committees, that's organization to delay.
Interesting background there. It's a good point, and we have seen that he has been against this for several sessions now, multiple sessions. Guys, thanks so much. We appreciate your time, and thank you for watching as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics. We hope you can join us then. Take care.